welcome to the first statement, Secretary of State for Defence, John Healey.
With permission, Mr. Speaker, I wish to make a statement to update the House on the action that we took last night against a Houthi military target. We did so in collective self-defence and to uphold the freedom of navigation as Britain has always done. Mr. Speaker, yesterday UK forces conducted a joint operation with US allies against a Houthi military facility in Yemen. Our intelligence analysis identified a cluster of buildings 15 miles south of Sana'a used by the Houthis to manufacture drones of the type used to attack ships in the Red Sea and in the Gulf of Aden. Royal Air Force Typhoons, FGR-4s, with air refuelling support from RAF Voyager tankers, struck a number of these buildings with paved way for precision bombs last night. This action was limited, it was targeted, it was devised to minimise the risk of civilian life. Everyone involved in the UK operation has returned to base safely. And I want to thank, on behalf of the House, all members of our armed forces involved in this operation and to pay tribute to them for their total professionalism and their courage. Yeah. Mr. Speaker, yesterday's operation was carried out alongside the US, our closest security ally. It was conducted in line with both the UN Charter and the established UK policy of this government and the last. And in opposition, Mr. Speaker, you'll remember Labour backed the government when it conducted 5 separate strikes with the US against Houthi targets. Mr. Speaker, yesterday's attack aligns with 4 broad objectives. 1, to restore freedom of navigation in the Red Sea and the Gulf of Aden. 2, to degrade Houthi capability and prevent future attacks. 3, to reinforce regional security alongside allies and partners. And 4, to protect our economic security at home. First thing this morning, Mr. Speaker, the government briefed the Shadow Defence Secretary, the Speakers of both Houses, the Liberal Democrats Defence Spokesperson and the Chair of the House of Commons Defence Committee. I can tell the House now this afternoon that our initial assessment is that the planned targets were all successfully hit and we've seen no evidence of civilian casualties. Mr. Speaker, since November 2023, the Houthis have waged a campaign of aggression against international shipping in the Red Sea. To date, there have been over 320 attacks. These attacks are illegal, they're deadly, and we totally condemn them. Maritime routes have been disrupted, sailors have been killed, commercial ships have been hit and sunk. The Houthis have even targeted aid vessels destined for Yemen itself, as well as military vessels of our allies and partners. Both the Royal and the US Navies have been forced into action in the Red Sea, and last September I met the crew of HMS Diamond, who shot down a ballistic missile and multiple drones in self-defence during their deployment in the Red Sea. Make no mistake, the Houthis act as an agent of instability across the region. They continue to receive backing from Iran, both military and financial, and even Russia has attempted to support the Houthi operations. The aggression in the Red Sea and the Gulf of Aden is yet another example of how our adversaries are increasingly working together against our interests. So, Mr. Speaker, I want to be clear. This government rejects any Houthi claims that attacking ships in the Red Sea is somehow supporting Gaza. The Houthis were targeting tankers and seizing ships well before the war in Gaza began. Their attacks since have targeted vessels of all nations. So hear me when I say these attacks do absolutely nothing for the Palestinian people or the push for a lasting peace. Mr. Speaker, an estimated 12% of global trade, 30% of container traffic passes through the Red Sea every year. But the Houthi threat has led to a drastic fall. Levels are 55% down on what they were in November 2023. The majority of ships now take a 5,000-mile diversion around the Cape of Good Hope, adding a full fortnight to a journey between Asia and Europe and pushing up prices of the goods that British people and others rely on. This cannot continue. And Mr. Speaker, in opposition I argued, and I quote, "The lion's share of the responsibility for protecting international freedom of navigation in the Red Sea is being shouldered by the Americans, just as the US has been doing across the world now for 80 years. And since last month, the US has been conducting a sustained campaign targeting the Houthis in Yemen to restore freedom of navigation. They moved 2 carriers into the region. Their recent strikes have destroyed multiple command and control centres, air defence systems, advanced weapons manufacturing sites and advanced weapons storage sites. The US military say their operations have now degraded the effectiveness of the Houthi attack, reporting that ballistic missile launches have dropped by 69%, one-way drone attacks are down by 55%. Mr. Speaker, the US continues to be the UK's closest security ally. They're stepping up in the Red Sea. We are alongside them. Yesterday's joint operation builds on the broader support that we've provided to the US in the region in recent months. That includes air-to-air refuelling, the use of our important military base, Diego Garcia, for regional security operations, and our AF Typhoons to support the defence of the US carrier strike group, which has been coming under near daily attack now from Houthi missiles and drones. Mr. Speaker, this government will always act in the interests of our national and economic security. The UK is now stepping up and encouraging allies to do more to protect our common security, just as we are with last week's deployment of our own carrier strike group, starting an 8-month deployment into the Mediterranean and Indo-Pacific. The UK has a long, proud history of taking action to protect freedom of navigation. This illegal Houthi aggression doesn't just disrupt shipping. It doesn't just destabilise the region. It hits our economy here at home. And that's why the government took this decision. That's why the UK has taken this action, to help protect freedom of navigation, reinforce regional stability, strengthen economic security for families across the country. Mr. Speaker, we are determined that we will keep Britain secure at home and strong abroad.
Shall the Secretary of State, James Cottridge.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'm grateful to the Secretary of State for early sight of his statement and to the Minister of State for the Armed Forces for the briefing he extended to myself and other parliamentarians earlier today. As far as His Majesty's opposition are concerned, the rationale for these actions has not changed since we undertook similar operations in government in the months leading up to the general election with the support of the then opposition, and we agree that this action is effectively an act of self-defence on behalf of ourselves and our closest allies. After all, with the main target for RAF Typhoons being a Houthi drone factory, we should remember that drones were used by the Houthis to target our own naval ships, such as the attempted drone attack on HMS Diamond in January last year. But whilst HMS Diamond was able to take effective action in response on that occasion, we know that this is a capability that can be produced in very large numbers and that the threat remains a clear and present danger. Indeed, we understand that the US Navy continues to be subject to Houthi aggression, including from drones. Thus, in our view, it is entirely legitimate to support the defence of our close ally, the US, and to prevent future potential attacks on our own fleet and international shipping by attacking the Houthi drone threat at source. But the Houthis' actions are not just a threat to ourselves and our allies. As the Secretary of State said, they are illegal and completely counter to international humanitarian priorities, given that their attacks have imperilled aid deliveries to the Yemeni people, whilst undermining a crucial shipping route for grain en route to some of the poorest people in the world. The government therefore has our full support for this latest operation, and we are grateful on this side to the brave and highly skilled personnel of the Royal Air Force who conducted the mission, including both the Typhoon crews and those supporting the air-to-air refuelling mission. In particular, we welcome their safe return and completion of what appears to be a successful operation in terms of degrading Houthi drone capability. Of course, the US have been undertaking their own self-defence against Houthi attacks, and we very much welcome the close working with US allies, as was the case when we were in government and under the previous administration in the US. This underlines the continuity of our most important strategic military partnership, and it is right that we work as closely as possible with the US to address threats to freedom of navigation. That said, Mr. Speaker, that freedom of navigation is vital to the ships of many nations, not just the UK and the US. The whole world benefits from action taken to keep international shipping flowing, supporting the wider economy. So can the Secretary of State update us on what talks he has had with other allies, including NATO members, on providing direct military support against the Houthi threat in future? After all, this is not only a threat to many other nations, it involves other hostile states, notably Iran, with their long-running support not just for the Houthis, but also Hezbollah, Hamas and other armed groups in Iraq and elsewhere. So how will the UK dock into the approach being taken by the new US administration towards Iran? The Secretary of State also referred to Russian involvement. Can he confirm reports that the Houthis have received targeting assistance with potential ballistic missile attacks from Russia? And does this not show why supporting Ukraine against Russia is about a much wider strategic picture that directly threatens the United Kingdom? He also referred to the use of our military base, Diego Garcia, for regional security operations. Well, soon it will not be ours, Mr. Speaker. And doesn't this kind of action show why surrendering its sovereignty is so reckless? Finally, turning to the SDR. It was very concerning that the Permanent Secretary to the Ministry of Defence said to the PAC yesterday, and I quote, "It is a strategic defence review that will need to be translated into a set of specific investment decisions in individual capabilities and projects. That will be work for later in the summer and into the autumn." He knows that there are urgent procurement decisions needed that relate directly to the Houthi threat in the Red Sea, not least upgrades to the Sea Viper system, which we believe must be accelerated. He also knows that procurement is largely on hold, awaiting the publication of the SDR. So he promised to publish the SDR in the spring. Can he confirm it will definitely be published in May, which is the last month of spring, and most importantly, that in May we will see the full detail on all major individual procurement choices so that the MOD can get on with them as a matter of the utmost urgency?
Mr. Speaker, can I welcome the Honourable Gentleman's tone and the content of his response to the statement. Labour backed the previous government's strikes against the Houthis. He points out for the House that the rationale then is the same as the rationale now, and that was a useful contribution to this discussion. He's right to say that the clear and present threat that the Houthis pose to all nations, including to ours and to our closest allies, is also the same. And, Mr. Speaker, when I was Shadow Defence Secretary and responded to the previous government, I did so as he does to me today, because this is bigger than politics. This is about freedom of navigation, it's about regional stability, and it is also about that most important security relationship that the UK has with the US. He asks me about some specific capabilities. I have to say to him, look, we are now able to plan to provide the best possible kit for our armed forces because of the historic commitment to raising the level of defence spending to 2.5% that the Prime Minister made to this House in February, 3 years earlier than his own unfunded plans, and then, of course, moving it to 3% in the next Parliament. He asks about the capabilities on some of our naval ships. And when I met the crew of the HMS Diamond in the autumn, they demonstrated to me and talked to me in detail about just how exceptional their response to that multiple attack was, and just how effective the weaponry on HMS Diamond was at that time. And therefore, we are upgrading the ships with a number of capabilities, including Dragonfire, something that he first talked about. But I say to him, we are now doing not just one ship, as he talked about, but 4. We're doing it sooner than he planned, and we're fully funding it, which he hadn't done. And Mr. Speaker, he asks about the discussions with other nations. Those discussions about the importance of regional stability, about the Houthi threats and the freedom of navigation in the Red Sea were discussed by foreign ministers at the G7 and at NATO foreign ministers within the last month. And the very carrier strike group that he welcomed the deployment of last week is multinational by design, is designed to exercise together, but together to reassert some of those basic principles that the attacks last night were designed to support, which is the freedom of navigation of our seas.
The Select Committee, Tabanji Singh Desi.
Very much, Mr. Speaker. I am grateful to the Secretary of State for his statement, and indeed the Minister for the Armed Forces for his in-person briefing beforehand. I am also glad that our brave service personnel involved in yesterday's strike have returned home safely, and that the Precision Sovereign strike has destroyed the drone factory with no civilian casualties. I agree with the Secretary of State that Houthi attacks since 2023 have tragically killed innocent merchant mariners, led to a shocking 55% drop in shipping through the Red Sea, costing billions, fueled regional instability, and has exacerbated the cost of living crisis here in the UK and across the globe. But how confident is my right honourable friend, based on current intelligence, that after yesterday's strike, that there will be freedom of navigation and that there will be no further loss of life because of the Houthis?
Same state.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I'm grateful to my honourable friend's support for the action that we took overnight. It is part of a sustained campaign, which is a US campaign that we are working alongside. There is no overnight solution to this, but the evidence that is reported from the US military of this new sustained intensive campaign seems to be having an effect on the pace and the rate and the threat that the Houthis pose. And our action last night was designed to reinforce that campaign, to support the push for regional stability, and also to protect the domestic economy and the impact of the disruption in international shipping and the effect that that has on prices for ordinary people.
Liberal Democrat spokesperson Helen Maguire.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you to the Secretary of State for advance sight of his statement and for the briefing from the Minister for the Armed Forces earlier today. The Houthis' destabilising military campaign in the Red Sea has had a chilling effect on trade through that vital waterway, threatening lives while also imposing costs on British businesses and consumers. The Houthis cannot be allowed to act with impunity and hold the global economy to ransom by restricting freedom of navigation. It's important that their military capabilities are degraded to ensure that trade can flow freely, and that's why we on these benches support the case for limited strikes. And we thank the service personnel involved for their bravery and are pleased that they have returned home safely. It's vital, though, that we fully understand the operational goals behind the mission, as well as the intelligence planning and coordination of the strikes. So can the Minister outline to the House why the government has chosen on this occasion to join the US forces in a joint strike rather than on previous similar missions? The recent leaks from President Trump's cabinet, also pertaining to military action in Yemen against the Houthis, raises concerning questions about how secure US intelligence is and the possible impact on British service personnel. In light of those leaks, can the Minister reassure us that intelligence sharing with the US is completely secure, and whether the government has undertaken an assessment of the security of our intelligence sharing networks with the US? I was reassured to hear from the Minister that the government does not have evidence of any loss of civilian life. So can the Minister update the House on what steps were taken ahead of the mission in an effort to minimise civilian casualties?
Mr. Speaker, I neglected to respond to the honourable gentleman on the SDR, and just would say to him, when the SDR is published in the spring, then he will have all his questions answered. And to the honourable lady, I welcome her recognition of the importance of degrading military capabilities of the Houthis. I welcome her support for the action that we took last night. I say to her with confidence and reassurance that our own UK intelligence, our own UK communication systems remain secure. And in response to her question about why now, first of all, it is action and a decision that we took that is in line with long-established policy, UK policy and the UN Charter. Secondly, it is a reflection of the fact that the US, as I've reported to the House, is stepping up, and we as a close ally are alongside them in this action. And third, it is to protect our economy at home, because the majority of the shipping in this busiest of international sea routes has this big detour that pushes up prices, so that it has a direct impact, not just on our security interests, but on our economic interests in Britain. And that's why we're acting.
Emily Thom.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Can I refer the House to my register of interest? The Houthis say that they're shelling international shipping in order to help the Palestinians. However, does my right honourable friend agree that not just by undermining international trade, but by causing a devastating decline in the use of the Suez Canal and crashing the numbers of cruise ships visiting Aqaba, they are actually attacking Egypt and Jordan, two countries who could not be working harder for a future for the Palestinians, who could not be giving more support, whether it is financial, whether it's political or diplomatic, and a refugee for so many. If they really care about the Palestinians, does my right honourable friend agree? They simply should stop this.
Mr. Speaker, I totally agree with my honourable friend. Jordan and Egypt are doing a lot of the heavy lifting in trying to support the Palestinians. It's notable that there is no evidence that the Houthis themselves have provided any aid to the Palestinians in Gaza. And the action that they're taking, the disruption and the intensification of the insecurity in the region is doing absolutely nothing to help the Palestinians' cause.
Sir Oliver Duff.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I welcome this action and join the Defence Secretary in paying tribute to our exemplary armed forces. And it is essential that we tackle the tentacles of Iran through all its proxies, whether it's the Houthis, whether it's Hamas or Hezbollah, that do so much damage to Israel, to the wider Middle East, and not least to the people of Palestine. But I think one of the fundamental questions here, as he will know from the discussions we had when I was Deputy Prime Minister, is what is the long-term strategy to eliminate this threat of the Houthis to Red Sea shipping? And I wonder whether, for the benefit of the House, the Defence Secretary could give some further indication of the new government's thinking on that long-term strategy to address this threat.
Yeah, Mr. Speaker, I pay tribute to the way that he, when he was Deputy Prime Minister, went out of his way, as we are doing now as a government, to make sure that we were well briefed on such strikes, and I appreciate that. He's absolutely right that military action against the Houthis can only take so far. Therefore, the wider strategy must be the UK doing what we can to work with allies, especially in the region. First of all, to constrain the Houthis, as our action overnight was designed to help do. Second, to bolster the strength and authority and capability of the Yemeni government, which is what my honourable friend, the Foreign Office Minister, announced some of the governance support earlier in this year. And the third then is to pursue with allies the importance of a negotiated settlement that gives Yemen a peaceful way forward. And in the meantime, not to lose sight of the responsibility that we have as a nation to support the Yemeni people that are suffering so greatly. And I know that he will welcome the fact that my right honourable friend, the Foreign Secretary, announced in January an extra 5 million of UK aid to Yemen, It brought the total over the previous 12 months to 144 million, and the UK remains the third largest donor to the Yemeni humanitarian programme.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I thank the Secretary of State for his statements and echo his words about the courage and professionalism of our service personnel. It's good that everyone's returned safely. But isn't it a case that having a strong and capable military is essential to ensuring our economic security and freedom of trade? And isn't that why the financial institutions and pension funds should be increasing their investment in defence industries and not listening to those voices who are opposed to that?
Quite right, Mr. Speaker, and my honourable friend will be interested to know the work that I and the Chancellor together have commissioned on the barriers in the UK that at the moment are holding back private sources of investment in our defence and our technology industry. And an important part of the defence industrial strategy, when we're able to publish this before too long, will be about how we use the big commitment that this government and this country is now making to invest in defence and our armed forces fit for the future, how we can use that to leverage much more of private sector sources alongside it so that we can do more quickly.
Sir Julian.
Clearly unusual for a terrorist group engaged in a civil war to invite retaliation of this sort by attacking international shipping so comprehensively. So clearly they are acting as an agent in Iran's strategy. Therefore, can he advise us, what do the government know about the ability of Iran to keep fueling these attacks in the Red Sea, now that the domestic ability to manufacture drones in Yemen has been degraded? How easy will it be for Iran to supply them directly to the Houthis?
The short answer, Mr. Speaker, is that we must do what we can with allies to make it as hard as possible for Iran to maintain both its financial support to the Houthis and its logistical and munitions and military support and supplies to them. We are working on that with allies. And as I've said to the House earlier on, straight military action that we were conducting last night is a part of the solution for the long term. It is not the whole solution.
Mr.
Speaker, and I'd like to thank my right honourable friend for his statement today. And obviously we've had a long-standing relationship with the US. They're our closest security ally. Would he agree with me that our continued work on AUKUS will help to deepen and strengthen that for all of the nations involved?
It will indeed, Mr. Speaker, and the AUKUS programme is a good example of how big defence commitments aren't just a long-term deterrent commitment to our own security and that of our allies, but they have an important economic boost, and how defence can be a driver of economic growth. And my honourable friend has the privilege of representing the town of Barrow, and the Royal Shipyard there will know better than ever and better than anyone just how important that combination is, and that is hardwired into the approach that this government takes.
Dave Dugan.
Mr. Speaker, the brutal oppression of the Palestinians in Gaza will not be helped one iota by the bombing of merchant shipping and the drone strikes against the merchant marine. So we're supportive of the action that's been taken. Seems to be an operation which has the appearance of something which may endure into a more strategic affair. And I wonder if the Secretary of State agrees that, notwithstanding the general consensus in the Chamber today for the action that was taken, whether or not a broader debate in Parliament would be desirable, not to discuss operational imperatives or plans or anything of that nature, but to further reinforce the will of the House. And whilst he celebrates the actions of aircrew, will he further acknowledge that the aircrew wouldn't be able to do the tremendous work they do if it wasn't for all the other trades that keep them mobilised?
Well said, Mr. Speaker. He's absolutely right that standing behind our armed forces and the ultimate professionalism they display is a large cadre of civilian and military personnel that make those operations successful and possible. Mr. Speaker, he'd be wrong to say that this is a sustained campaign. This is the first UK strike on Houthi positions since May last year, and Parliament will be kept informed in the event of any future military interventions such as this.
Kelvin Bailey.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Freedom of navigation in the Red Sea and the Gulf of Aden is essential to the global economic system, and anything that impinges on this impacts the global economy, increases costs to the environment, and impacts the poorest people in the world. It's for this reason that I'm proud of my association as the former commander of the Expeditionary Air Wing, whose Typhoons and Voyagers were launched last night and carried out these strikes. Does the Defence Secretary agree with me that this action forms part of the joined-up international strategy to end these attacks and defend freedom of navigation?
I do indeed, Mr. Speaker. It is part of a longer-term programme to try and degrade the ability of the Houthis to hit international shipping, to defend and protect the freedom of navigation, and also to recognise that conflicts in the Middle East have a big impact on business and on prosperity in this country. And the British Chambers of Commerce recently published a survey that said 50% of businesses in Britain report that they've now been impacted by conflicts in that Middle Eastern region.
Dr. Andrews.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I draw attention to my entry in the register and congratulate all involved in a very successful joint operation. Matters like this are likely to attract retaliation from Iran and its proxies. What is being done to prepare and support our allies in the region against possible attacks? And as Carrier Strike Group 25 prepares to transit and exercise in the region on Operation High Mast, will he assure the House, without going into specifics, that all is being done to protect our men and women?
Mr. Speaker, he's served, I think, in 2 terms as a Defence Minister. He will know the highest priority that Defence Ministers and Defence Secretaries, including myself, give to our force protection. And that was a matter for me and the Armed Forces Minister in detail to go over with our military planners and our military chiefs before the carrier group set sail. And I was briefed again on it when I visited the carrier with the Prime Minister last week. In general terms, Mr. Speaker, this operation last night was designed to prevent further escalation. It was designed to prevent further Houthi attacks by taking out the major weapons manufacturing site, which we struck last night.
Joanne Bass.
Mr. Speaker, I thank my right honourable friend for his statement, and would also want to pay tribute to the courage and professionalism of all of our service personnel who were involved in this successful operation. Does my right honourable friend agree with me that this whole House should stand together against the Houthi attacks, which challenge the freedom of navigation and, if left unaddressed, could lead to a devastating rise in the cost of essential food items, not just for my constituents in Paisley and Renfrewshire South, but here across the UK and in other countries?
My honourable friend puts the argument very well. This is a matter of freedom of navigation. It's a matter of international law, but it's a matter of economic self-interest for us in Britain, because the price paid by the disruption to world shipping and this essential trade route through the Red Sea, that price is paid by ordinary people in the food they buy, the goods they depend on, and that is in part why we've taken the action we did last night.
Monica Hart.
Mr. Speaker, can I also pay tribute to the professionalism of our armed forces and thankful for their safe return? Can I ask the Secretary of State, is he confident about the appropriate security for our military personnel, given the previous leaks from the Trump administration on Signal, given details of attacks before they happened, and what reassurances he has had from the United States on this?
Secretary of State.
I am confident, Mr. Speaker. We handle secure communications in secure ways, and we do that consistently here in the UK.
Mr.
Speaker, I join my right honourable friend in paying tribute to the Armed Forces personnel who took part in last night's action. And the fact that it's us that were supporting the USA in this action really does emphasise the close relationship we have with the USA. But in this morning's papers, it's been suggested that our desire to do a trade deal with America has been pushed back to a second tranche of countries, or maybe even a third. Well, does my right honourable friend share my disappointment at that decision, and would ask that perhaps the Trump administration returns to that issue and considers the close relationship we have both on defence and intelligence?
Well, Mr. Speaker, I would just sort of gently urge my honourable friend not to necessarily believe everything that he's reading in the newspapers. He's very experienced and he's got a very good insight into the political world. Just to reassure him, we are putting out all the stops behind the scenes to try and settle a trade deal with the US, just as we are to reinforce the special depth of the relationship on the security and defence matters between the UK and the US.
Mundell.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I very much welcome the statement and the action, which I fully support, and I'm very pleased to hear of the level of engagement by the US. But the Secretary of State will recall that in the previous Parliament, the humanitarian situation in Yemen was the subject of frequent debate and discussion, and it does appear to have just fallen off the agenda, partly because of atrocious conflicts elsewhere. I was pleased to hear what he had to say in relation to the FCDO approach, but will he ensure, as the FCDO has more constrained resources, that Yemen and the humanitarian situation there does remain a priority?
Secretary of State.
I am confident that my right honourable friend, the Foreign Secretary, has that in mind. He will be conscious, as the right honourable gentleman is, that the UK doesn't just act as the third largest donor in the Yemen humanitarian programme, but also the penholder for Yemen at the United Nations.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I thank my right honourable friend for his statement and associate myself with his words about our brave military personnel. Does the Defence Secretary agree with me that we must reiterate how the Houthi attacks are illegal, they're against the UN Charter, and they target the principle of freedom of navigation that all nations benefit from, including our allies in the region, and that our action shows that working in concert with our allies internationally can improve regional stability and security, and indeed our security here at home?
I do indeed agree with my honourable friend. This is a matter of reinforcing regional stability. It's a matter of defending and protecting the freedom of navigation. And it's also a matter of protecting our own economic interests back home. And I make no apology for standing up for British interests and for those of our allies.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And we at Reform fully endorse the government's action against the Houthis and thank our brave and brilliant military personnel. The Secretary of State referred to the continuing support of the Houthis by Iran, and so could he update the House on further sanctions against Iran? And surely now is the time to prescribe the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps as a terrorist organisation.
Mr. Speaker, the honourable gentleman has been around long enough to know that I won't comment on the process for prescription of the Houthis. Suffice to say, the government has sanctioned a number of the major leaders of the Houthis, and I hope that he will take, and I welcome his welcome for the action we took last night, and I hope he will take that action as a sign of a determination to do what we can alongside our US allies to degrade their ability to continue to threaten freedom of navigation for international shipping.
Ali.
Mr. Speaker, the Houthis are acting freely in an absence for a roadmap for peace. Yemen is facing the worst humanitarian crisis. 22 people need assistance, of which 11 million are children in desperate need of food, water and medical supplies. To defeat the Houthis permanently, will the Secretary of State give a commitment that his government will do all that is possible to deliver a roadmap for peace, along with allies, to make sure that this happens now? Otherwise, it will be a lost opportunity.
Mr. Speaker, I said to my honourable friend in the House earlier on, the responsibility I have as Defence Secretary is for the military component of a wider approach that must be pursued if we're going to be able to help play an important role in securing peace and settling the civil war in Yemen and lifting the relief of those hundreds of thousands of Yemenis that are suffering so severely. Constraining the Houthis' threat is part of that. Reinforcing and bolstering the Yemeni government is also part of that, but then working with allies, particularly leading regional allies, in trying to force the pace of a negotiated settlement and a peace in Yemen is absolutely crucial.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I welcome the Secretary of State's statement and add my thanks and appreciation to the Royal Air Force and all those involved in this successful operation. Now, in his statement, the Defence Secretary said even Russia has attempted to support Houthi operations. But, Mr. Speaker, isn't it a little bit deeper than that, as the Wall Street Journal has reported that targeting data provided by Russia has been utilised by the Houthis for their attacks against Western shipping, while Iran has arbitrated secret talks between the terror group and the Kremlin. So what steps is the Secretary of State taking to disrupt Russia's deepening ties to Iran and its proxies across the Middle East?
Very good.
Mr. Speaker, I'm really not going to disclose in public or even to this House the steps that we're taking to deal with some of that covert Russian activity that goes well beyond not just Yemen, but obviously the wider Middle East. But suffice to say, he's made a contribution to the discussion this afternoon on the statement by reporting the Wall Street Journal's report to the House.
Sure.
Speaker, and I add my words of support for the actions the UK took last night. The Houthi group is a terrorist organisation that's been deeply destabilising, and it's right that we're playing our role in protecting freedom of navigation. At the same time, the Halesoan community of Yemenis are really concerned about the desperate humanitarian situation in Yemen. Could the Minister add a few more words on what we're doing to support Yemenis that are so desperate right now, and what we are doing to help end that civil war?
Yes, Mr. Speaker. I mentioned the uplift in year that the Foreign Secretary gave to our contribution to the Yemeni humanitarian assistance plan. It makes us the third largest donor. Our focus for the aid has been especially on food, which is of a critical shortage and necessity to many hundreds of thousands of Yemenis, and we calculate that we will have helped almost 900,000 Yemenis with our food support this year. And our support then is also on healthcare, supporting over 700 medical centres across the country with medicines, vaccines and some of the basic equipment needed to provide the healthcare that people also so desperately need in that country.
Thank
you, Mr. Speaker. And may I share in my recognition of the RAF's role in last night's operation. But given the existing global commitments of our Typhoon squadrons, should the Coalition of the Willing provide a military contribution to any post-war force in Ukraine, and therefore a combat air patrol or air policing role in Ukraine, in addition to the Baltic and the High North, how will we continue to facilitate direct action, such as the strikes against the Iranian-backed Houthis in Yemen, with no plans to purchase a second tranche of F-35Bs?
Well, Mr. Speaker, on the matter of Ukraine and potentially a role of in the coalition of the willing and security guarantees, if the negotiated peace settlement can be put in place, which we all hope President Trump secures. We're planning at the moment. The sort of consequences of any commitments that we make will be fully explained to the House if a decision gets taken. But to say to him, this is contingent on a ceasefire, it is contingent on a peace agreement, and that is contingent principally on Putin to do what he says he wants, which is to see an end to the fighting there.
Alison New.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I thank the Defence Secretary for his statement and pay tribute to all those involved in this successful strike. Does he agree with me that this government will always put personnel at the heart of our defence plans?
For too long, Mr. Speaker, I believe the previous government overlooked that. They set and failed to meet their recruitment tests. And I'm proud to have been a Defence Secretary in a Labour government, able to give the Armed Forces personnel the largest pay increase last year for 20 years, and to be the first Defence Secretary who can stand at this dispatch box and say nobody in uniform will be paid less now than the national living wage. And I'm also proud, Mr. Speaker, to have managed to do a deal to buy back and bring into public control 36,000 family military homes, the consequence of which was quite the worst privatisation ever in 1996 under that previous Tory government.
Jeremy Corbyn.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In reply to an earlier question, the Secretary of State talked about the devastation in Yemen with 11 million people in desperate need of help and support and the civil war conditions that pertain there. This armed intervention that was made yesterday by Britain, I think we all need to know where it leads to, what the end game is in this. Are we involved in an internal war in Yemen? And what is the long-term implications of our involvement in this? Because ultimately there has to be some kind of peace process in Yemen, just as much as there has to be in Gaza and elsewhere within the region. Does this actually bring peace nearer, or does this actually exacerbate the danger of a widening conflict?
Mr. Speaker, the Honourable Gentleman is right to remind the House of the extreme hardship of many Yemenis in what is a war-torn country and has been for years. The strikes last night were designed to reduce and prevent the risk of further Houthi attacks, and were done because we were able to take out an important weapons manufacturing facility that the Houthis had, manufacturing the very weapons that have been used to target international shipping and our own.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I welcome the Secretary of State's statement today, and I'd like to add my own thanks to our service personnel for their action. I'd also like to talk about the Houthis and what they've been doing alongside the other terrorist proxies in the Middle East, the Hamas and Hezbollah, who are controlled by Iran. Therefore, I would ask my right honourable friend, what is this country's policy in disrupting and containing this network and attacking the heart of it, namely Iran itself?
My honourable friend is right. Iran is a destabilising influence across the region, not just in its own terms, but particularly in the way that it has developed, sponsored, supplied proxy groups. And the Houthis are clearly supplied by, supported by Iran, and part of the long-term ability to see a secure Middle East, a conflict-free Middle East, has got to be a reconciliation that Iran has, that it stops using these proxies in order to threaten both neighbours in the region and the interests of countries like ours.
James Whale.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. US action in recent weeks has considerably degraded ballistic missile and drone attacks, and I welcome these RAF strikes. However, this action will only work if it is sustained. So will the Defence Secretary commit to ongoing UK and RAF direct support to US Operation Rough Rider to strike Houthi terrorists, rather than the ad hoc approach adopted so far, so that we can properly restore freedom of navigation?
Rough Rider is a US military campaign. We took action last night alongside the US, and any future military interventions like last night will be reported to the House.
Steve.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thanks to the Secretary of State for his statement to the House today. I'd also like to pay tribute to all of our armed forces personnel involved in the action overnight. Does the Secretary of State agree with me that the USA has always been and will remain our most strongest and steadfast security ally?
I do indeed, Mr. Speaker. The US-UK defence relationship has a special depth that has lasted decades. We do things together as two nations that no other nations do. We train together, we exercise together, and at times we have to fight together.